In study, I find solace. In history, I find a chorus of voices on the side of truth. The march to freedom from this perspective seems inevitable. In John Lewis's words, I found a kindred soul, one all too familiar with our modern struggle. In him, I found a beacon of hope, a guidepost to necessary trouble, and the guarantee that we've come together before and we can do so again. And it's in that promise that I found my way forward.
I think racism and the topic of racism, it starts from yourself. You want to see the judgments that you're making, you want to see the decisions that you're making, and you want to see if they're being impacted by race, if you're judging people on the basis of their skin color. And I think it actually starts from you, and then it starts from you and your surroundings, your close friends. If you see something, you need to be pointing it out. I think you need to use the resources available to make sure that you know the topics that you're talking about, and also help your family and friends go through it. And I think it's not just about combating racism and just being, not being racist, but I think you should be openly anti-racist as well, and making sure that if you see someone passing any remarks, or if you see someone being discriminated, you're able to speak out for that.
Starting, I would say they should start from the beginning where the roots are arriving. So like when commenting on each other, or I would say looking at someone like lower than you or higher than you and stuff like that.
I definitely think they should start with changing their mindset themselves. So really it depends on that one person to influence the whole community. So if one person could, be a little bit more open-minded and more inclusive, and not judge or basically not judge someone based on their skin color, culture, or like different race, that would be where they should start fight racism in any society, anywhere here in the world.
When I was in preschool, I got in trouble for using the wrong colored crayon to color in my skin on a piece of paper. I had chosen yellow because in my small 12-pack of crayons, it was the only color that made sense to me. My teacher informed me that I was incorrect. My skin was white and did not need to be colored in. How privileged I am to not have to color in my skin. At the time, I thought this was ridiculous because all skin has color. My mother taught me that you can make any skin tone with a brown crayon. Some people may be the lightest of beiges and others the deepest umber, but they're all just skin tones and can be made with a brown crayon. Looking back, of course I know there are tones that come from a color wheel outside of brown, but I've always appreciated this lesson. All skin tones can be made with a brown crayon, but different pressures are applied to make each shade. The lightest of colors receives the smallest amount of pressure, while the darkest shade receives the highest level of pressure. The light beiges are privileged. They aren't pushed very hard. There is no fear of the crayon breaking. The dark umbers are at the opposite end of the privilege continuum. They are pushed very hard. Sometimes the crayon breaks.
I'm a girly girl. I love shopping. I love picking out my clothes for the day, finishing off with accessories. It's who I am, and I love that quality about myself. But I was not always so confident with my clothing choices. Growing up a girl is hard. Constantly categorizing individuals to society's expectations, equating certain aesthetics to specific personality traits or groups. Assumptions are impossible to escape. Typical girl, am I right? Battling insecurities while on a hunt to create my own identity through fashion expression. I think most girls can confirm it really isn't until middle school that the real social pressures start to kick in.
Young Raquel, poofy hair, brown skin, I was sure to stick out in a classroom full of only white teachers and white children. And that made me have a specific goal in my appearance and persona: to be perceived as white. That meant going out of my way to mention, you know I'm only half black, right? I love country music. I don't really listen to rap, really. My brother is so blonde. Same mom and dad, too. At the age of 12 years old, I had already internalized a plethora of characteristics or items that symbolized black culture and therefore needed to be avoided. You would not catch me wearing hoop earrings, for that would be ghetto. Black girls confront both racial and gender bias in the educational institution growing up. As a result, Black girls are disproportionately either suspended or pulled out of class for breaking dress code. They are disproportionately pulled out of class or suspended for being too defiant, too loud, too assertive, too sexy, too provocative, too much. This is according to a Law Center and Education report titled, "And They Cared: How to Create Better, Safer Learning Environment for Girls of Color." As I altered my appearance to match my idea of an innocent, trustworthy, clean, whatever type of image that was unattainable, I lost the fire that comes with owning my Black heritage. Then, I would never admit this shame, but I can recall the uneasy feeling in my stomach when preparing for a play in the classroom or it's a historical event, let's say. Not a lot of Black female characters. I went to a Catholic school, actually, and let me tell you, they completely whitewashed Mary and Jesus. I break out of my comfort zone to engage with my past taboos. In fear of being labeled the angry Black girl, I was quiet, never wanting to draw attention to the differences I had with my classmates. I even erased the accent mark I used in my name, a clear indicator of ethnicity that my Caucasian mother named me. This accustomed association with the single race or national origin has resulted in disciplinary disparities. I would see other girls wearing hoop earrings, and I thought they were very pretty, but keep in mind, I was only seeing them on other white girls. I needed to farther censor myself to be considered appropriate. I am proud to be content with myself now. I'm lucky enough to have gotten to experience a more diverse community as I've gotten older. I used to indecisively stress and contemplate my outfits before school, never wanting to be too much. But I had an ardent desire to dress fashionably to my ideal, a balancing act that would never succeed. As I trade the hoop earrings for a dainty pair of studs, the connotation these accessories hold is prevalent by the adjectives I use while describing them. Hoop earrings: loud, sexy, provocative. Stud earrings: delicate, clean, appropriate, approachable, responsible. What's difficult to digest of all this praise for all things Black, from cornrows, acrylic nails, big booties, hoop earrings, tribal fabrics, is it only becomes chic or trendy when it's worn by white women. When it's on a Black girl, it's ghetto, urban, ratchet, meaning I'm pretty. I am proud of my Black culture, and I constantly remind myself to display that pride. Being a part of this generation, I feel a responsibility to dismantle these discriminatory views that have become second nature. Oh, I am not any less caring, any less smart, any less sensitive will I wear these braids or not. So catch me wearing my hoop earrings.
On May 25th, I heard of the death of George Floyd. I remember first hearing the news in my apartment living room while I was sitting on the couch, going through my phone, looking at the news. I remember thinking to myself, again, knowing that it was bound to happen again because of the current structure of our society and how everything is now, but still thinking to myself, again? How many more lives have to be lost and have to be taken? I look at my Facebook and I see people just commenting, saying all sorts of things, blaming George for what had happened to him. And I just think of this and all the other situations where a person of color, particularly a Black man, is murdered. And the people who have the same color as the police officer have no problem saying, you know what, it was his fault he died. How often in our society do we have to deal with the oppressors not taking responsibility for their actions and for not acknowledging their part or their contributions to a bigger, more oppressive system? I think of this and I think of all the anxiety this causes for people, stress, the fear that people of color, particularly the Black community, has to deal with on a day-to-day basis. I think of George in those few moments of his life, right before he passed. I think of his fear, his panic, him crying out for his mother, and it reminding of me, myself, when I was younger, when I was scared, when I was so afraid, and the only person I thought who could protect me in those moments was my mother. And I think of George in those moments, crying for his, looking for that support and comfort, and not being able to get it, not being saved, which is what he needed. I think of all the pain that this has caused. And once again, how many more lives are going to be lost?
Hi, Javier. How are you? I'm doing good. Well, Javier, I just wanted to, ask you questions and, and tell you a few things. Javier, I think people just don't understand me here. I don't know what the problem is, but they just don't understand me here. I don't know what the problem is, Javier. I know you're trying to be nice to your auntie. I know you're trying to be nice to your auntie. Javier, stop. I know you're trying to be nice to your auntie. Javier, when the event was going on in the park, your mom came up to me and she told me, go invite one of your good neighbors on the park. And I went up to him. I told him, we buying bravoches on the park and they should come up, and we even have salad. Javier, they didn't show up. Javier, they did not show up. And minutes later, your mom comes up to me and she's like, you invite them? I said, yeah, I did invite them. And she sends your sister. The sister comes up to him, and minutes later, I kid you not, they all show up. I don't know what the problem is. Do I sound weird to you? I don't know. Do I sound weird to you? I don't know what the problem is. Don't know what the problem is. The plumber on the back who was fixing stuff when we were doing the event? I went up to him, and I offered him drinks and everything. And we're chatting. He was a good old man. He was a good old man. And I told him, we were all talking all that. And he asked me for directions to the other store we went to the other day, on the other side. And I told him, he asked for directions, and I go to him and I told him, you just fall on the street and you go all the way up straight, and by the robot you take right, and the next robot you take left, and it'll be on your left side. And he looked at me crazy. I kid you not, he looked at me crazy. I don't know what the problem is. I don't know what the problem is. I just don't know what the problem is. I know you're trying to be nice to your auntie. I don't even know I'm stressing about this. I don't know. I'll just take your car. Since it's parked on the front, take your car. Yeah.
They want to hear my sorrows. They want to hear how I wept. They want to hear how my womb cried out and burnt to ash screaming when he yelled for his mother. They want to hear how my DNA shrieked. And they want to hear how it all fell again onto my shoulders, and how I, the earth, shook.
Defined. Skin color, something so simple yet so complex. Variations of melanin. Feels like a hell I'm in. There's no protection for those of that colored skin. Too pigmented, too dark. Oh, how far we've come apart. But can this only be the start? And if so, how do I play my part?
Alright guys, for this scene I'm going to portray something that's happened to me, but I've never experienced something like this before this scene. So hopefully you guys understand what happened after I played it. Can I get 6 potato wedges, 3 cheese curds, 3 slices of bread, and some sweet and sour cream sauce? You guys have any of those? I know you guys usually don't. You do? That's good to hear. That's how long it's gonna take? I don't mind waiting. How much are the cookies? $1.50? They're not even that big. How much for the smaller one? 75 cents? I might as well get the bigger one. 2 minutes is how long it's gonna take for you to make it? That's okay, I'll wait it out. Did you pay for that? I'm sorry? I said, did you pay for that? I mean, I haven't paid for it yet, but I'm going to. Please take off your hood. Did that help a little? Yes, now I can clearly see you. I mean, I can't pay for it back here. There's no self-checkout. And there's no checkout. It doesn't have a register. It doesn't matter. You shouldn't put things in your pocket. You see, I was planning on paying for it with my other stuff when he brings it at the self-checkouts, because there's nothing here to pay with. Okay, all right, but you shouldn't ever put things in your pocket when you're at the store. Do you work here? I mean, yeah, I do work here. My vest is right here. Like, I don't have my vest, but like I have my badge. What's your name? What's your name? I can just tell you my name. You don't need to look at the badge. Yes. Yeah, I want to know your name. My name is Mohammed. Okay. All right. I'm gonna get a manager, because You can't do that. You can't put your hands in you can't put stuff in your pocket, especially if you work here. If you want to do that, that's okay too, but I don't see why you would need to do that. Alright. Okay. Alright, Paul, thanks, man. I'm gonna take this, I'm gonna pay up front. I appreciate it. I still find difficulties sharing this story because this story of mine is something that a lot of people experience, but nobody wants to speak about it. To some of y'all who watched that clip, you might have been wondering, what happened? I didn't see anything wrong that happened, and that's okay. But if you put yourself in my perspective, you go trying to buy something, and then you see something that catches your interest. No bags around you, no basket. So you put in the only bag you have, your pocket. And then somebody questions you. I did some research and I noticed a couple of CNN articles that talked about something like this. Over 8,000 Starbucks closed in the year 2018 because of racial biases. People were trained to target certain races to watch over them. And obviously that's not okay. But then I was wondering why? Why did they do this? What led them to do something such as this? I did more research and I noticed websites such as Statista that shows statistics of certain races and the burglary rates of those races. Over 200,000 cases of burglary happened with the race of African Americans. But to my surprise, there was more than 500,000 cases of burglary from white Americans. But still, the general public targets African Americans and other minority groups. And then I kept doing more research and I noticed a familiar situation that happened somewhat like mine. In a CNN article, I saw that a couple teenagers walked into a company, Nordstrom, if you've heard of it, wanting an item, but then they were accused of stealing. The feelings that these teenagers described were being ashamed. And that is what I felt. The feeling of being shamed for something that you haven't done yet is something you cannot describe to somebody unless they experience it. You see, the day prior to this experience that I had, me and a couple friends went down to the cities and we joined the riots for George Floyd. The sweetness of being part of something greater than me, being part of a community, and trying to make change and trying to get justice for somebody was very sweet. It was a very good experience. And then the next day I experienced the sourness of confrontation firsthand. From these two experiences, I created something. I created a sweet and sour experience. Something I implemented in myself, and I became a different person. From the sweetness of looking for justice and sourness of being confronted by someone when you haven't done anything wrong, I created a new feeling.
We must be patient. But it's hard to be patient when these issues have been waiting for resolve for decades, centuries before your birth. Slow and steady wins the race. Well, America forgot that it was a race 100 years ago. Does this mean we are patiently awaiting change? Or have we given up? In this world of hate, I have seen so much love. Love in the man who spends his days walking folks through George Floyd Memorial. Love in the ability to finally speak up about these atrocities. Love is patient. Love is kind. How can people still find patience and love after 400 years of ostracism and oppression? We are not done fighting. This patient storm is rising. Love conquers all, and equity will mend the lives of the broken.
studied abroad in South Africa, and when I went talk to white people in South Africa, a lot of the times they would assume that I was on the same page with them as far as their race beliefs. They would say to me things like, I was in an Uber, and there was a white Uber driver, and he was pointing at various black college students on the way to campus, and he was saying things like, look at them, they don't know what they're doing, they're ruining this country. They don't even know how to use their phones. It's just a fashion thing for them. And it's just bizarre to me that that line of reasoning is even something that happens, you know.
Personally, I've not faced any racism. I do have friends that tell me stories. I do have close people who tell me stories about what happened to them, but I personally have not faced or been in a situation where somebody was being a racist to me.
Yes, I would say that, but I would still say that I wouldn't say that I face racism like a lot of other people do. I think, especially in the United States, the racism faced by the black community is on a far different level than the racism faced by other people of color. But it also, I think I've faced a lot of racism and discrimination at workplaces where there weren't a lot of people of color. I think because of my religion, I've faced some sort of Islamophobia whenever people get to know about my religion as well, and especially as most of the people are aware, especially after 9/11, and someone like me who travels internationally a lot, I think we do face a huge amount of discrimination on the airports. I hardly remember traveling in and out of the country when I'm not pulled out of the line and taken into a separate room for questions, which not anyone else goes through. So I think, yes, there have been a lot of events where I would say that I did face some kind of discrimination, but also I want to make this forward that I don't think that I or people of my community face the same kind of discrimination like the black people here in the United States.
Honestly speaking, I haven't faced a great deal of racism. I don't know if it's because I didn't sense that or because usually whatever people say to me, I'll just think that they were joking. So I haven't really, as I could remember, I don't think I have ever felt being judged or anything based on my race yet.
I wasn't when I was in my country, but I did face racism after coming to USA, and there was some, it wasn't bad, but there are some instances where I had to just live with it for a while, knowing that it was racist, but I never went on complaining about it, except it hurt me to see how people treat me that way.
The effects of the pandemic on people of color is something else that very few are addressing. No one wants to talk about how people of color are experiencing economic challenges, or how communities of color are seeing more significant mental health problems. No one wants to talk about how difficult it is to social distance and stay away from people when you live in a crowded apartment. Or what can be done when you don't have health insurance and you're too ill to work. It is important to look at these situations through an intersectional feminist lens as well, especially when it comes to the health of women of color. The focus tends to be more on men when it comes to racial issues, but women deserve particular attention because of their issues related to their gender and race. Lives are at stake, and there is a huge need for reform. Black women shouldn't have to worry about being 3 to 4 times more likely to die during childbirth, simply because they have more melanin than their white counterparts. Also, Black women shouldn't have to fear having a severe disability resulting from childbirth. This is just the tip of the iceberg.
of health-related issues in terms of what women of color have to deal with, particularly Black women. There's so much more to fear and worry about when you're a woman of color. Not only are you discriminated against and judged because of your race, but you are put down and discredited simply because you are a woman. You have to fear harassment, and then you have to fear sexual harassment on top of it. Women of color deal with all forms of racism and then have to deal with sexism on top of it. All of this can contribute to anxiety, depression, hypertension, and a plethora of health implications.
Frozen origami is important because it's been twice transformed. First, somehow the neat crumpling of paper breathes life into recognizable shapes. Exposure to the elements now makes these same shapes brown, curled, and lifeless. I saw in them the preservation of a travesty. I wonder which one of the elements caused the most damage. The wind, the rain, the snow, or the suffocating racism and the ensuing grief.
Fear and dread. Is it all in my head? How can there be so many dead? I thought we lived in a post-racial society, but why do you always keep an eye on me? I just want to be better, not bitter, but you just keep on thinking like Hitler.
The George Floyd movement has touched me very deeply. It has surprised me in such a good way, and it has showed me that there's hope for racial injustice in America. I expect from the society to educate themselves more upon racial issues and the injustices people of color face on a daily basis.
I do believe that we definitely still have a lot to do and a lot of fighting to do and a lot of awareness and being educated on the topic. And I believe the country is just taking baby steps, and we still have a long way to go. So the beginning is what's important, and we hope that we'll get there and completely abolish racial mentalities and accomplish the racial equity that we want and we believe in.
No one has to call me derogatory terms for me to realize that as an African American Muslim woman who happens to be an immigrant is devalued in this society. I don't have to be called the N-word for me to realize and be more aware of the subtle ways the society devalues, degrades, and objectifies me to society. In moments like that, you would look to communities that you share the same struggles, fight the same battles, to look for peace and solace. When it's your own community perpetuating that internalized racism, there's a conversation to be had. Let me take you back to April of 2008. In April of 2008, I had just started my school that predominated Somalis. And there was little to no other change. It was just one community going to that school. And my teacher had just finished reading a book to us when she got a phone call. Okay, students, listen up, guys. I will be taking the phone call. I want everybody to turn to their neighbor and tell them your favorite thing about the book. I'll be right back. As she left to answer a phone call, I had answered my own phone call of awakening. I was awakened when my classmate approached me and said, "Hey, come here. Can I see your hand real quick?" "No, I'm not gonna do anything. I'm just gonna look at it." "No, I'm not gonna do anything here." "Your skin looks like poop. Your Your skin looks like poop. I was terrified. I was humiliated. I was sick to my stomach as I had millions of feelings rushing through my body. But one thing I could think of is, she's right. And society tends to do that. Brainwashes you to thinking you are something that you're not. Society brainwashes us into thinking that some things are true when often it is just a construction of lies that was perpetuated for years, and then people started to think that that was factual. But in reality, it was like a warped mirror where our image was completely distorted, and the mirror was society telling us how we looked and who we were. In the Somali community, colorism is a topic that is shied away from. A lot of people don't like to have that conversation as it is taboo, and the sooner people have that conversation and sit down and try to dismantle it, the sooner we will overcome it. Because the more we try to brush it under the rug, the more we try to pretend like there's no issue, the more it's growing, the more it starts to affect more people. The words we use, the language that we use that is slight but we can't recognize the undertone is the reason why it's growing. And it's been going on for so long that we can't see an issue with it. In fact, 12% of light-skinned women face shorter time than the dark-skinned women, and the time served ended up being 11% less than the dark-skinned women. A study done in the University of Stanford says the reason comes down to the fact that the jurors can consider who they think is more innocent by how attractive they look. And light skin and thin is considered to be attractive in society, so they have a leniency where the dark-skinned woman does not. We know how much attention racism gets and how affecting it is to people's mental health and their lives in general. But colorism takes the same effects and has the same problems, and it doesn't get that much. Colorism is defined as the prejudice and the discrimination of people with lighter and darker skin tones. We often think that only people with darker skin tones face discrimination, but in reality, lighter skinned people face discrimination too. People often question and scrutinize them about what their ethnicity is, what their background is, and why they're so proximate to whiteness. These questions are the effects of colorism, and although they don't face the negative consequences of being looked down upon and devalued, they still face that aspect of it, whereas people with darker skin don't face that aspect. They just face the devaluation and the preference that their lighter people are better. And who makes those rules? How did we as a society come up with the notion that lighter skin is preferred and darker skin is not? Thank you.
My heart is seared and left cold. My throat constricts. Hearing his name stills me. The only thing that moves are my salty tears, and I, like Lot's wife, can't look away from this city in flames.
Love. It's everywhere, but it's also hidden from the world. Lately, there has not been a lot of love in the world. There's been a lot of hate.
I feel like I'm in a void, walking between worlds in a gray space, safe, but alone.
And if we think in our hearts and look in our hearts, we will find that love, we will be able to love each other no matter how different you are or how the same you are.
When he died, I declined offers to speak. It was just too soon, and I needed time to rest. But in doing so, I felt removed. I was far away from the action, guilt-ridden, scared to be pandemic-stricken, stuck, frozen, a stone of horror and contemplation.
Truth. If you are not truthful to everything, your word means nothing. Therefore, people should not listen to you because you are not truthful. You are a liar. And if you lie to the people that are most close to you, you will have no one.
Sometimes I'm so horrified and disappointed in the world, the only thing I can do is cry.
The love we are able to feel toward one another today across communities and cultures, even though it may only be a trickle from a dam that still needs to be released, cannot be easily shaken. Some people want to turn back, but it will not be easy to turn off the spigot and retract the waters that flowed into a human heart so easily. John Lewis.
The human heart is the most important frontier to conquer in the struggle for human dignity. John Lewis. It's the action, not the fruit of the action, that's important. You have to do the right thing. It may not be in your power, may not be in your time that there will be any fruit, but that doesn't mean you stop doing the right thing. You may never know what results come from your action, but if you do nothing, there will be no result. Mohandas Gandhi. Sarah needs time alone, my grandma would say. Sarah's just one of those kids who needs time at home. I'm still like that. Especially in a time of tragedy, my first instinct is to go home, to return to the bookshelf, to the armchair. Only after I've reorientated myself back in history can I re-enter my body. Only after I've entered my body can I act. In moving out of self and into a performative, troubled communion with others, we have the opportunity to look beneath the skin of our own privilege, oppression, pain, and hubris, and into the possibility of a utopian performative, a different future, one full of hope and reanimated by a new, more radical humanism. Tammy Spry and Jill Dolan.
Creative diplomacy will supersede the robotic drone of militarism, and we can find our natural place as leaders in a world community that has rejected the illusion of separation and responds with the power of love. John Lewis.
We did not just wake up one day, said John Lewis, to march on Washington or from Selma to Montgomery. We studied, we strategized, we organized, trained, and prepared to take action. John Lewis, Across That Bridge.
I think, like I said earlier, this year has given everybody a chance to kind of wake up from our comfort zone. I feel like being at home and not having access to our daily pleasures of even being able to go out to the movies or go and do things that we would call normal, that often people took advantage of. I feel like it's a scary place, especially being an election year. I feel like this year has just been one thing after the other. I'm grateful for it though, because it has gotten people to have conversations outside of their comfort zone and start looking within themselves to how they can better themselves as well as better the people around them. It has also shown what companies are made of and how they can step up, and we're not accepting the bare minimum anymore. I feel like people are now people have to step up, especially after this year. They have to step up in terms of racial injustice. They have to step up in a global pandemic and help people. So I feel like for my community, I'm hopeful because we have shown that we can step up and be there for one another. My family, I'm grateful that we have been able to have the privilege to stay home, work from home, go to school from home. And then for myself, I feel like I've grown 5 years in wisdom than I was in the beginning of this year. I feel like I can no longer take things for granted. So yeah, I'm hopeful for what's to come, but I do know that there's a lot of work left to be done.
When we follow the path of light, we co-align with the most dynamic forces of the universe, and we become greater than the sum of our parts. John Lewis, Across That Bridge.
Tragedy is the great equalizer, and no individual, regardless of wealth or fame, can escape the challenge tragedy brings. If one primary purpose in our lives is to cast off all illusions and awaken to the eternal knowledge of what is truly real, then tragedy can be viewed as an equal opportunity aid to our development. The problems we face in the trials of our lives, whether we are standing in protest against injustice or fighting cancer, battling addictions, or bankruptcy, our problems can help each of us grow beyond our personal limits. Our problems initiate a struggle within our own souls that take us to the brink of our own existence. As we command our spirit to find a way to overcome these obstacles, we are forced to break past any false trappings of the identity and to focus intensely on what is real and what is important. John Lewis.
All of our struggles here are based on one erroneous, pervasive, and persistent belief that we are somehow separated from the divine, that some of us have more light than others, therefore making them more deserving than others. All these inequities of our world are basically attempts to actualize this erroneous belief, and that is why there is turmoil. Because we are in conflict with the truth, working to manifest an idea that is false. The Occupy movement, the Arab Spring, the Civil Rights Movement, the activism of Gandhi, the French Revolution, and other social transformations down through the ages came to pass because people decided they deserved to live under a higher conception of reality. They decided they deserved better. John Lewis, Across That Bridge.
The reason the civil rights movement is looked to as a blueprint for change is that it employed a concerted collection of activist strategies so effectively that in about 12 years it transformed laws, attitudes, and traditions in this country that my parents and their elders thought would never change. Though we are still far from liberated, there is no question that American consciousness is different today than it was a decade ago. A quote from John Lewis's Across That Bridge. Individuals and groups must judge themselves to determine whether they have abandoned any of their own responsibility. But the question for us as a society is whether we participate in any way in the corruption of the defenseless, the undereducated, and the poor in spirit. We may not be able to stop the violence of others, but we can stop our own. A child is born in innocence, and this violence does not emerge out of thin air. It is created, fomented, and nurtured in them to their detriment. John Lewis.
All our work, all our struggle, all our days add up to one purpose: to reconcile ourselves to the truth and finally accept once and for all that we are one people, one family, the human family, that we are all emanations of one divine source, and that source is love. Our struggle to affirm the light, despite oppression, depression, conflict, poverty, hunger, disease, violence, and brutality, is a loving gift we give to ourselves and to one another to help humanity move toward the day when we can readily separate the light from the darkness and the equal incandescent beauty of the light that is in us all. John Lewis. You are a light. You are the light. Never let anyone, any person, or any force dampen, dim, or diminish your light. Lean toward the whispers of your heart. Discover the universal truth and follow its dictates. Hold only love, only peace in your heart, knowing that the battle of good to overcome evil is already won. Choose confrontation wisely, but when it is your time, don't be afraid to stand up, and speak out against injustice. And if you follow your truth down the road to peace and the affirmation of love, if you shine like a beacon for all to see, then the poetry of all, the great dreamers and philosophers, is yours to manifest in a nation, a world community, and a beloved community that is finally at peace with itself. John Lewis.
Betty Asphalt and Black Lives Matter.
Saadi and Black Lives Matter.
My name is Hilary Keza Hodari from Rwanda, and Black Lives Matter.
Ryan Walls, Black Lives Matter.
Sir Helios is a Surindaman president, Black Lives Matter.
My name is Yash Patel and Black Lives Matter to me.
My name is Cassidy and Black Lives Matter.